Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, which is SUKKAH Lamed Gimel. We are actually 9 lines from the top of the Amud, right at the 2 dots. The Mishnah spoke about Niktam Roishai. We're going back to the Hadas, whose Roish was Niktam. Its top, its point, was clipped off. That's possible because now it's lacking in Hadar. The Roish is the most prominent and noticeable feature in the Hadas, and if that's missing, the Hadas now lacks beauty. It doesn't conform to Hadar, and therefore it's puzzle. Tani Ula Bar Chinana presented a brisa. What about in the case where Niktam Roishai lost its top, also Beitzmara? In its place, in that clipped portion, we now see a Tzmara. Tzmara was a date-shaped growth, which covered over the clipped portion. Right at that cut, we have a Tzmara, and now the Hadas looks whole and complete again. Kosher, because now the Hadar status has been restored. See, the Ran explains that Hadar is personal. It's based on appearance. It looks nice. It looks whole. So the Hadar has now been restored. The Hadas is now back to its former glory, and it's kosher. By Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah wants to know, Rabbi Yirmiyah used to ask all these types of shilas, all types of circumstances and equations. What about the following case? Niktam Roishai Me'erev Yom Tov. So the tip of the Hadas was clipped off before Yom Tov. Also by Tzmara b'Yom Tov Mahu. So Yom Tov arrives, and suddenly we see a Tzmara surfacing on that Hadas. The point is that at the initiation of Yom Tov, it wasn't there, and the Hadas was puzzle. Do we say that now, where the Tzmara covered up that cut, it's going to reactivate the Hadas and re-enable it for mitzvah use? What's the shaila? Mahu. What do we say? Yesh dichay etzel mitzvahs? Oiloi. Shall we apply the concept of dichay to a mitzvah or not? What does dichay mean? Generally, we learn dichay by korbanos. You have a behema which was kadosh b'kedushas carbon and been pushed away. It got a psul, and then for some reason the psul is no longer. We apply the concept of dichay. It's been tainted. It's been rejected for any future use. So do we say that just as by a carbon, the kedusha is lost, it's off track, it can't be brought back on track. Once it was pushed away, that rejection gets applied for all time. So just as by a carbon we say that, by a mitzvah as well. And since this Hadas, at the onset of Yom Tov, which was the Zman HaMitzvah, this Hadas had no potential mitzvah functionality. It wasn't a chayfetz that could be used for a mitzvah. It's been pushed away. It's been tainted. Do we say that affects a rejection on it? That makes it not roy any longer? Even after the tzmara comes along and covers up that cut. Yesh dichi etzel mitzvahs. Does the contours of dichi, rejection, apply to a chayfetz shal mitzvah as well, just like by a behemoth carbon? Or perhaps we can differentiate. What would be the svara to differentiate? Let's take a look at Rashi first. So let's start from the Rashi, which is 6 lines from the top of the Amud. Also by Tzmara. So the Roish of the Hadas got cut off, and a Tzmara came in its place. Came in Tzmara like a date. Ke'ein hanimtza b'ali arava. As we find sometimes on the arava leaves, pa'amim ba'alan, dava came in peri, looks like a little fruit. Yarek, a green sort of fruit. V'tzayvin b'hanashim tzifein, which the women used to dye their kerchiefs. So just as we find them on the leaves of the aravis, a similar concept can be found on the cut portion of the hadas. This tzmara arrives and covers up that cut. Also by tzmara be Yom Tov. Now, it didn't happen before Yom Tov. It entered Yom Tov in a state of puzzle. And suddenly now we have a tzmara that arrives. Mishanegar, after it was bound together, the lulav with the hadas with the arava, and it's Yom Tov. How can we have a tzmara come by now once it's off the ground? Says Rashi Achidish, the betolosh nami salkabe. Sometimes you have this tomorrow coming along and even after it's been detached from the ground. And the shaila is, do we apply dichui? Explains Rashi. Yesh dichui etzel mitzvahs. Kaleimar. Neheges teiras dichui etzel mitzvahs. Do we apply dichoy by a chayfetz which is designated for mitzvah use? Just as we apply it by a carbon. After shchita, so the animal was nira, it was roy for carbon, and that got pushed away. It's no longer usable. Yidacha, it gets rejected for all time. The sulay hadar chazi, it can no longer be considered suitable. Here as well by a chayfetz shal mitzvah. Since at the point of niktam, when the head got chopped off, it was nitche, it was pasul. Sulay hadar mechsi balias tmara. Even after the tmara comes along and covers up that cut, it can no longer restore the hadas to mitzvah capability because it was rejected. Now Rashi will point out for us that we have two different levels of dichui, which isn't really relevant to our Gemara here. It's going to be Nogei on Amud Beis. So there are two levels of dichui. We have a more basic concept of dichui, which is dichui mi'ikara. Initially, it wasn't roy. It never had mitzvah capability. So that's called dichui mi'ikara. And the question there would be, let's say it now becomes suitable. Do we allow it? Or do we say, well, since you were rejected initially, you can no longer become roy. That's dichui mi'ikara, an initial rejection. Then we have a case of nira v'nitche, where it was kosher, and then it got pushed away. Something went wrong, it got pushed away, and now it lost that, whatever factor that pushed it away, it lost it. And now we want to restore it. That's called nira, it was available. V'nitche, it got pushed away. And the question is whether you can restore it and bring it back on track, which is actually a more severe type of dichui. Why? Because, when the thing was not right to begin with, you can still say, well, let's wait until he becomes right. The fact that he wasn't right until now doesn't necessarily mean he was rejected. He just wasn't fit yet. When the time came, he was. That's called dichui mi'ikar. So it's a lower form of dichui. Nira v'nitche is more severe because he was here, he was available. And then he got pushed away. That's a real rejection. That's a more severe form of dichui. And the Gemara later will actually differentiate between the two. In any case, Rashi says at this point we don't draw a line between the two. We're treating them all equally. Any type of dichui is treated as one. Rashi points out that this case that the Gemara is discussing now is a dichui mi'ikara. Why? This hadas was not roy at all, meaning kam yamtiv, which is really the trigger point, which is the determinant. The moment when Yontiv enters, that's what determines the status of the chayfetz. At that point, it was niktam roishay. It's dichui mi'ikara. And now when a tzmara grows over that cut, so now we have to deal with the shaila. Whether we apply dichui to this case. So since it wasn't roy at the onset of Yontiv, it's possible for all time. Or do we say, well now, it's considered hadar once again, and can be used. Now, as Tosfos points out, we find dichui by karbanos, and the question is, do we find it by mitzvahs? So Rashi and Tosfos both make that point of mentioning that by karbanos, it's a given. Dichui is applicable. The question is by mitzvahs, and the difference seems to be because a carbon is a chayfetz shel kedusha, so their rejection makes more sense. It's been pushed off track. This chayfetz has been rendered unfit for carbon use. So perhaps that carbon becomes tainted for all time. But when it comes to a mitzvah, a chayfetz shel mitzvah, which is for the most part a mundane item, it's just designated for the person's fulfillment of a ma'aseh mitzvah with that chayfetz. So perhaps here it's just dependent upon practicalities. If you're going to be mekayim with the mitzvah, if it's kosher, fine. If not, no. Don't necessarily say that once it loses its opportunity, it can't regain it. Well, I'm available. I want to do the ma'aseh mitzvah with this item. It's not so much item or object dependent. It's more the person doing the ma'aseh mitzvah with a chayfetz. and perhaps Dichay won't apply. On the other hand, you can say, well, once he's no longer designated for mitzvah, he's become apostle for mitzvah, become tainted and rejected permanently. So that's the Shaila. Let's go back to the Gemara. Says the Gemara, what's the question of Rabbi Yirmiyah? Dichay by mitzvah, no dichay, v'tivshel le'mehadesnan. Why can't we conclude with clarity from the following Mishnah? Kisov in Isgala. You have dam of a chaya or a oif, which needs to be covered. Kisu yadam. He covered it, and then it became exposed. Patam lachasos. He no longer needs to cover it. He did a mitzvah. Once he covered it, it's done. Kiso haruach. What if the wind came along and blew some earth over that dam? So it wasn't a manual kisu. It happened naturally. Chayav lachasos. In that case, he has to go ahead and cover the dam again. V'amar Rabba Babrachana, Amar Rabbi Yechona, lo yishanu. This is only said el shachaz v'naskala. If the dam became exposed again, so the wind pushed the offer onto the dam. Now the wind blew the other way and pushed the offer off the dam, and now you have exposed dam. So since it wasn't really covered by a person, so during the kisui, when it was covered, even by wind, okay, it's over. It's covered. Nothing you can do. But now that it's been exposed once again, you have to go ahead and cover it again because it never had a kisui through a person. But if the wind never came along and uncovered that dam, once it covered it, there's no need to go ahead and cover it again. Now we have a kasha on that Mishnah. How is it that you tell me if the wind comes along and uncovers that dam, which it had previously covered, you have to go ahead and be machaset again? Amai chayv lechases. Think about it. This dam was already pushed away from mitzvah fulfillment. It no longer had mitzvah capacity. It was covered by that wind. So now the wind came along and uncovered it. A mitzvah of kisei adam no longer applies to that dam, which has been pushed away from mitzvah use. The Gemara figures that when the ruach is machasa that dam, the fact is, it's covered, it's over. The mitzvah of kisei adam no longer can apply. So even once it becomes revealed again, it's over, it's been rejected, it's been tainted. It no longer has mitzvah capability. So that was the kasha on the Mishnah. V'amar Papa, we learn from here, ein dichay etzel mitzvahs. You're right. The concept of dichay doesn't apply to a chayfetz of a mitzvah. Okay, says the Gemara, we have a clarity. Pretty clear that dichay doesn't apply to a mitzvah. So what was Rav Yirmiyah's safek? Answers the Gemara, Rav Yirmiyah knew about Rav Papa. The Rav Papa gufa meboile. He was unsure what Rav Papa had in mind. Mivshat pashat lei. Was it clear to Rav Papa that the Tana of that Mishnah in Chulin regarding Kisi Adam held that the Ein Dichay Etzel Mitzvahs? He held definitively that rejection doesn't apply to mitzvahs in all cases. Loishna lekula, whether it results in a kula, such as in the case of the tumara growing on that hadas. You could be yaitzu with it, or whether it results in a chumrah, such as obligating kisu hadam. In that case, so is that what the Tana meant? There's no dichay by mitzvahs, irrelevant. Other circumstance, or perhaps the Tana, which required kisi hadam, really had an uncertainty. He was also misupik whether or not dichay is applied to a mitzvah. L'chumra amrina. And therefore, when it comes to a chumra, like being chayiv in kisi adam, after adam has been uncovered by the wind, yeah, l'chumra amrina, go ahead and do it. We don't apply dichay by a mitzvah if it results in a chumra. But l'kula amrina. But perhaps when it comes to a kula, like in the case of Rabbi Yirmiyah, can you go ahead and use that hadas, which was unfit at the onset of Yom Tov and now became kasha through a tomorrow? L'kula amrinan. We don't allow it to be used. Perhaps dichay in this case does apply. Take it, and therefore we leave it as an unanswered question. Says the Gemara, perhaps this very shaila of whether or not dichay is applied to a mitzvah is dependent upon a machlekes tanoim. We learned in the Mishnah, if there are more berries on that hadas, more berries than leaves, right? 100 berries, 99 leaves, hadas is puzzle. If he picks off those berries, right, he's memait the berries, hadas is kosher. But he's not meant to do it on Yom Tov. Why? It's actually a machlekes rishonim. Rashi over here learns it's a shvus mid'Rabbanan because it appears like he's being machshir, he's being misake, a kli, he's enabling the hadas for use. And Tosfos and Yuma as well learns it's only mid'Rabbanan. The Meiri learns it's really a malacha d'oraisa. It's makabeh patish. He's finishing a product, he's completing a utensil, he's producing something, he's enabling the hadas for mitzvah use. In any case, you're not meant to do this on Yom Tov. However, says the Bryce, Avar reliktam. Let's say he transgressed. He went and he picked those berries. Puzzle. The hadas now is puzzle. Divrei Rebbe Lezer ber Tzadik. So according to the Shita, even after he picked off those berries, it's puzzle. So that's Shita Rebbe Lezer ber Tzadik. The Chachamim machshirim, they say it's fine. Now, Savrua, the Bnei Yeshiva, who wanted to suggest that the machlekes Tanoim in this brisa revolves around our shaila of whether or not dichu is applied to a mitzvah, they figured like this. The only issue that could be of relevance in this brisa, the only concern is dichu. There were no other concerns. So they discounted all the other concerns. So therefore they figured the kuli amal lulav ein tzarich eged. All agree, meaning Lezer B'Tzadik, Chacham agree, there's no chiv to bind, to tie together the lulav with the hadas and the arava. So there's no doing, there's no fashioning, there's no asiyah when it comes to lulav. In which case, even if he went ahead and he already tied together the lulav with the hadas and the arava, and at that point the hadas had tons of berries on it, we don't consider that to be a problem. That's not the issue here. What could be the issue? There's a problem with the asiyah because when he bound it together, when he created that bundle, it was puzzle. It was full of berries. So even if after he picks it, it's already after the fact, it's been bundled together with psul. No, that's not the issue. Because lulav ein tzarich eged, you don't have to bundle together the lulav. There's no chiv to tie it together with the hadas. So there's no asiyah at all applied to in the making of the lulav. So that can't be an issue. Now, if you propose that all agree eged is part of the procedure, you have to tie it together, there has to be an asiyah, still, that won't really present a concern. Meaning, if he tied it and then afterwards pick the berries. Why? Lo yalfina lulav misukah. None of these Tanaim learn lulav from sukkah, whereby sukkah it says the chsiv ba tasa, you meant to actually make it when it's kosher. You have to do it in a way that enables the sukkah for use. As opposed to something which was merely formed after the fact circumstantially. It has to be manually made in a way which enables the sukkah to be used. That's by sukkah. But by lulav, tie it together and pick the berries later. So in any case, these issues of tasa, asiyah, don't apply to the hadas here. So what then is the discussion? What's the machlekes here? He has a hadas tied together with his lulav. It's already Yom Tov. He wants to pick the berries. Rabbi Lezer says it's pasul. Chacham say kosher. What's the point of machlekes? What's the background? My lab b'kamiflagi. Apparently, the machlekes is based on our shaila of dichi. The man the pasul savar. Amrinon yesh dichi eitzel mitzvahs. Rabbi Lezer, who says pasul, he holds dichi affects a mitzvah as well. Well, here there was dichi. Why was the dichi? Because it's already Yom Tov. This man ha-mitzvah has already arrived, and this hadas was puzzle, was full of berries. It's been rejected from the get-go, from the initial moment of Yom Tov. It was unsuitable for mitzvah use. Picking the berries afterwards, that's too late. It's been thrown off track. You can't restore it. Yesh dichei etzel mitzvahs. Uman de machshir, savar, the Rabbanan hold, lo yamrinan. We don't apply dicha by a mitzvah. Go ahead and pick the berries and use it. Even though it was not roy at the onset of Yom Tov. When Yom Tov arrives, this thing was full of berries. It's okay. It's all about practicalities. It's kosher now, go ahead and use it. It would seem that our shaila of whether or not dichud can affect a chevetz shel mitzvah is actually a machlekes tanoim. Says the Gemara, no, not necessarily. Loi, the kuli amalei amrin ish dichud shel mitzvahs. Perhaps, according to both shittas, we don't apply dichud to a mitzvah. So what then is the point of contention? Says the Gemara, let's go back to asiya issues. All hold that lulav needs eged, which means you have to go ahead and bind together the lulav with the hadas. And asiya is part of the procedure. The question is, how much of an asiya do you need by lulav? Do you actually learn lulav from sukkah? And just as by sukkah it has to be manually made bekashrus, likewise on the lulav, an asiya bekashrus is mandated. And therefore, once you bound the lulav with the hadas, which was possible, you did the asiya with pasas, it won't help you to come back and pick those berries. So that's the shittas of Rabbi Lezer. Mar savayafina lulav misukah. That's Rabbi Lezer. You derive lulav from sukkah. It needs to be an asiya, a manual enablement. You have to go ahead and enable this thing manually, l'shem mitzvah. That has to happen before you bind it. So the binding is considered an asiya bekashrus. Umar savayafina lulav misukah. Whereas the Chacham say we don't learn lulav from sukkah. By sukkah, there's a halach of tasa v'lo ben asi. You have to build up bekashrus. But by lulav, just bind it together. Even if it's at this point full of berries, that's okay. Pick them afterwards, and it's kosher. Another pshat can be lulav tzarech eged. If lulav would need to be bound, the kuli alma yalfina lulav misukah. All would agree. We connect it to sukkah. That's so similar. In each case, you need an asiya, and just as by sukkah it has to be asiya bekashrus, likewise over here, the binding has to be when the hadas is enabled for mitzvah use. There wouldn't have been a machlekes to begin with. So what then is the point of machlekes? There's a fundamental shaila here. Is there a din of eged by lulav? Is there a din asiya to begin with? Rabbi Lezer says yes. Therefore, you have to pick those berries before you do the asiya, which has to be bekashrus. Chacham say there's no din eged. There's no din asiya. Come Yantiv, you have berries, pick them off, it's okay. Because the asiya doesn't apply to a lulav. And actually we find this machlekes elsewhere. That in Tanoi. It's in line with another machlekes Tanoim. Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabban, whether or not eged is a requirement. The sign lulav bein aged, bein she'ein aged kosher. Whether or not the lulav is bound together with the other minim, it's fine. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, aged kosher, she'ein aged pasul. If it's bound together, it's kosher. Otherwise, it's pasul. My time with Rabbi Yehuda. What's Rabbi Yehuda's reason? Yolaf lekicha agudas ezev. He learns through a gzera shava. From agudas ezev, the bundle of grass is used in Mitzrayim to smear the dam on the doorpost. By lulav it says l'kachtem lachem. Uksav hasim over there in Mitzrayim it says l'kachtem agudas ezev, and we learn ma'alhalan aguda. Just as over there it was a bundle of grass. Avkan aguda. Likewise over here, l'kachtem lachem has to be one single bundle, one single unit. Rabbanon less l'kicha. According to Rabbanon, we don't have this ksera shava, which is something you have to learn from your Rebbeim. They didn't have that Masorah. So according to them, binding is not necessary. If so, man tana lahadatan rabban, who's the author of the following brayso which says lulav mitzvah la'ogda? It's a mitzvah to bind the lulav. V'lo ya'ogda kosher. And even without igur, it's still kosher. Who is this? Shita. Mani. Who? Who's speaking? Rabbi Yehuda. Is this Rabbi Yehuda? Kilo ya'ogda, am I kosher? If you fail to bind it, why is it kosher? It's critical. Igur is a requirement. Rabbanon. So you'll tell me it's Rabbanon. Well, why get involved in binding at all? My mitzvah kavod. What mitzvah did he do? Rabbanon don't require igud. So it's not a mitzvah. Rabbi Yehuda considers it to be vital and critical. The Brisa says it's a mitzvah to do it, but even if he neglects, it's still kosher. Whose shita is this? Certainly it's the shita's Rabbanon. although it's not vital, but it's a mitzvah. Mitzvah. This is my Hashem, and I will beautify myself before Him. Tying together the minim presents it neatly and nicely, it beautifies the mitzvah. So although it's not mi'akiv, but it is a mitzvah l'chatchila. Okay, let's just stop for a second. So we had the machlekes by Avar v'liktan b'yamtiv. Rav Lezer Tzaddik says pasel, Chacham say kosher, and we had several ways to understand the machlekes. Initially, the Gemara figured, you know what the machlekes is totally in? Our question, whether or not dichui affects a mitzvah. So the Gemara figured both shittas hold lulav ein tzarach eged. There's no din asiyah, and even if there is eged, we don't learn from SUKKAH where it needs to be an asiyah b'kashrus. So asiyah is not an issue here. That's not the concern of the brisa. What then is the machlekes? Apparently, the shaila is whether or not to apply dichui. Rabbi Yehuda says yesh dichui til mitzvahs. If you pick the berry on Yantav, it's too late, because once Yantav arrives, that's its man mitzvah, and that triggers the mitzvah, and that determines the status of this hadas. If it's not right, it becomes rejected. Chacham say, when it comes to a mitzvah, we say ein dichui til mitzvahs and it's kosher. That's what the Gemara figured. The Gemara comes back and says no. Perhaps all shittas agree that ein dichui til mitzvahs. So what's the point of machlekes? It's an asiyah discussion. So firstly, we had a shaila of whether or not we learn from SUKKAH, meaning perhaps all agree that lulav needs to be bound. The question is, how far do you have to go when it comes to that asiyah? Rav Lezer says, we learn from SUKKAH. When you bind it, it has to be enabled for mitzvah use. If you bind it full of berries, it's too late. Chacham say, we don't learn from SUKKAH. Binding is sufficient even if at that point of binding it was not yet roy for mitzvah use. Second shot was, it's more basic. The question is whether you need eged. Rav Lezer says you need eged, and therefore an asiyah has to be done properly. B'kashrus, you have to pick the berries before you bind together the lulav. According to Chachamim, it's kasher because there is no din eged by lulav, even though it's l'chatchila, but it's not mi'akev, it's not really a vital component in the lulav mitzvah, and therefore it doesn't relate to asiyah. You're not forming anything, you're not creating, not fashioning anything. So pick your berries whenever you want, and your lulav is kosher. Continues the Gemara. Let's go back to the Mishnah. We had a hadas full of berries, more berries than leaves. Mishnah says it's puzzle, it's lacking in hadar, it's no longer beautiful, and the Gemara will tell us we're speaking about blackberries, and therefore they interfere with the greenness of the hadas. The other Mefarshim say it's actually batal b'roy. If you have more blackberries than leaves, the leaves are batal. So whatever the reason is, the hadas is puzzle. Amr of Chizda, Davar said the following thing, Rabbeinu Hagadol Amr. Our great Rebbe said it. Who's that? Rashi says it's Rav. So he said the following statement, V'hamakam yiyah be'ezri. He gave him a bracha. Hashem should help him out. He should have siyat l'shmaya. So what did he say? Lo yishanu. This concern is only el b'makim echad, when all those berries are concentrated in one area, and they're really noticeable. Aval b'shnayim or shleishim makayma kasher. But if they're dispersed throughout the hadas, you have them distributed 2 or 3 places around the hadas, it's fine. Amalei Rava, shnayim or shleishim makayma have a numar, apostle. I don't understand. When it's distributed, it also is lacking in beauty. It's menumar, it's spotted like a leopard, like a number. Of course it's possible. That can't be true. Ella says the Gemara Itmar, if we learned the halacha, Hachi Itmar must have been in this way. The Mishnah says, Aisha hayu anava merubin ba'alav pasel. If you have more berries than leaves, it's pasel. Amar Rav Chizda Davar said the following thing, Rabbeinu Hagadol Amri. Rav said it. V'amakim yeh be'ezri, Shav se'at l'shmai. And what did he say? Lo yishanu. Berries only pose a concern, Ella anavav shchayres, when those berries are black, in which case they interfere with the green color of the leaves. Aval anavav yeroikos, but if those berries are green, minei da hadas nenu, the kasher, it's the same color as the hadas. It matches and it's kosher. Amar Papa. Adumois. What if the berries are black? Sorry, they're red. Kishchiris damim. We treat them like black. Because red and black are close enough, and even red is considered something dissimilar to green, in which case it interferes. How do we know that red is a forerunner to black? High dam, regarding the dam of an isha. So if it's red, it makes her tummy. So Rabbi tells us, let's say she has black dam, high dam shachar. Adamu, we consider it like red blood. Why? Because it's the red dam which got discolored. So you see that red and black are close in nature. And therefore, when you have, just as you have blackberries interfering with your green hadas, likewise, red berries as well don't really match up with the green, and they're considered like black, and the hadas is possible. So bottom line is, if we have green berries, you're okay. Black or red is problematic, and it's irrelevant of whether they're located in one location or dispersed throughout the hadas. The Mishnah tells us you're not meant to pick those berries on Yom Tov, but in miyatan kasha. Right? So the Mishnah says if we have more berries than leaves, it's possible. V'miyatan kasha. Right? If he picked those berries and he reduced them, so now the berries are outnumbered by the leaves, it's kosher. However, not meant to do it on Yom Tov. Says, well, let's analyze the Mishnah. And this really relates back to the question of dichui, of rejection. So if you pick those berries, the hadas is now kosher. When did he pick the berry? Before binding the hadas with the lulav or afterwards? The matinu emas. When did he do this? Did it happen before he tied the hadas with the lulav? Pshita, of course. Of course it's kosher. Why would you think otherwise? There's no reason to make it possible. He fixed it and he used it. Apparently it was after he bound it with the lulav. So during the igud, the hadas was possible, full of berries. After igud, he came and he fixed it. Here we have a classic example of something which was initially rejected. During igud, which is really the trigger point, that's when he's turning it into a lulav shel mitzvah. It's possible. It's full of berries. It's dochim yikara. Still, what does the Mishnah say? You come back and pick those berries. Tivshet mina. You could conclude from this, dichim yikara lehava dichui. An initial rejection doesn't affect the chevet shel mitzvah. It can bounce right back and be used. That's a raya to our shaila. Lo ilam basa da'agdi. Says the Gemara, no. We're speaking that he picked the berries after binding the hadas together with the lulav. But let's just fix up your perception. You figure that igud is considered creating, fashioning, and that's a trigger point. That point determines the status of the hadas. No, that's incorrect. Because savar eged hazmana ba'almahu. The Mishnah figures, the Mishnah holds that binding together, the act of binding, doesn't really create a new entity until Yom Tov comes around. But it's still before Yom Tov. It's just a preparation for Yom Tov. It's true 100%. Eged creates a new bundle, a new entity. But it's a pending entity. It's awaiting the arrival of Yom Tov. That's when it's chal, that's when it gets activated. But if he's simply binding it and it's not yet Yom Tov, that's merely considered like a hazmana ba'alma. He's preparing it for mitzvah use. V'hazmana ba'alma lav klum. Merely hazmana is lav klumu. It's not really going to affect the status of the chayfetz. So even though he bound a berry-laden hadas into his lulav, he did eged, which is a maisa, which is an asiyah. He fashioned a new entity. But it's pending. It hadn't yet been activated. And therefore, even if that hadas is not yet kosher, as long as he comes back a few minutes later, picks those berries, and come Yom Tov, this aguda is ready for use. In this case, no dichui has ever taken place. So you have no right that dicha mi'ikara is not a problem. This wasn't dicha, because he picked it before Yom Tov. And when the Zman of mitzvah arrived, it was perfectly suitable, perfectly right, and able for mitzvah use. And this is different than our case. The case of the hadas, which was clipped off, and a tzmara came along. That happened on Yom Tov, right? When the Zman mitzvah arrived, the hadas was pasul. On Yom Tov itself, you find a tzmara, which grew over that cut. That's a question of dichay. Because when the Zman mitzvah arrived, when Sukkot began, this hadas was pasul. So that's a good shaila. Does dichay affect the mitzvah or not? But in this case, he picked it before Yom Tov. That's not an issue. So Mishnah continues, V'ein mematrim b'Yom Tov. However, on Yom Tov itself, you're not meant to pick those berries. It's a shus d'Rabbanan, or it's a deraisa. What does it sound like? Ha'ava v'liktan ma'i kasha. Perhaps the Mishnah is telling you that don't do it, but if you did it, it's kosher. Oh, now we're going to have another raya to our shaila. So although the hadas was pasul, and coming into Yom Tov, it was sort of tainted, because it was not enabled for mitzvah use, it was full of berries. What does the Mishnah tell us? If he goes and picks those berries on Yom Tov, it's kosher. The achshur emas. Let's analyze the case. The ashchur, when did it get black? Well, we discussed the fact that only black ones interfere. The ashchur emas, when did this concern arise? When did it become black? Elam with the ashchur me'esmoil. Shall we say it happened yesterday? So it came into Yom Tov in this status, of pasul. Dochim yikaruhu. Here's another case of an initial rejection. When Yom Tov arrives, this thing was pasul. And what does the Mishnah tell us? Or how do we imply from the Mishnah? And picking it on Yom Tov is okay. If he does it, it's kosher. Tifshei Binah, you can conclude from this. Dochim yikar lehavadichu. We have a riot, our shaila. We see dochim yikar, something which was initially rejected, meaning at the initiation of Yom Tov, it was unsuitable. That unsuitability doesn't affect the long-term prospects of this hadas. Apparently, it got black on Yom Tov itself. So in this case, it's not dochim yikara, because when Yom Tov arrives, this hadas was kosher. It had berries, but they were green, which are fine. They match up with the leaves. They started drying and maturing on Yom Tov itself. So now when they got ripe and they got black, the hadas is no longer used. It's no longer kosher. And now the Mishnah tells us if he should pick it on Yom Tov, he can restore the hadas to its former self, make it kosher. Oh, nira v'nitchu. Here we have a case where it was roi at a certain point in time. Beginning of Yom Tov was roi before it turned black, and then it was pushed away from its use when it turned black. And what do we learn? This thing can be restored by removing the berries. So this is actually a more severe form of dichay, as we mentioned earlier, because it was roi and it got pushed away, and it could still bounce back and come back. Shamas mina nira v'nitcha. You can learn from here that an item which was roi and then got pushed away, chayze v'nira, can be restored once again. That's a big chiddush. So either way, you have a raya. Whatever the case is, you have a raya to some aspect of our shaila of dichay by mitzvah, right? If the berries were black yesterday, entering Yom Tov, being unsuitable for mitzvah, that's called dichay mikar, and that works. You can pick those berries. So the berries blackened today, okay, so then it was roi at the onset of Yom Tov, it was nira, then it became nitcha. And by picking the berries, you can reactivate the hadas. That's nira v'nitcha, chayze v'nira. Either way, you have a definitive clarity on our shaila. Says, well, no. Let's go back to the first option. They blackened before Yom Tov, and it entered Yom Tov being pasul. Picking the berries on Yom Tov could be machshir. Okay, so you learn from here, initial rejection doesn't affect the chayfetz. That you see. Tifshepina. That you can conclude from the Mishnah. True? I agree. I grant you that much. Because dichay mikar is not so severe. Aval nira v'nitcha chayze v'nira. But in a case where something was roi for mitzvah use, and then gets pushed away, to allow that to come back, that's already a bigger chiddush. Lo sifshet, you cannot necessarily learn from here. So certainly we learn one thing from the Mishnah, that Adichim B'Yikar is not a concern when it comes to the Hadas. We're speaking where the Hadas turned black yesterday, so it entered Yontif in a state of paslus. That's Adichim B'Yikar. We learn from the Mishnah that if he should go ahead and pick those berries on Yontif, he can be masha that Hadas. Apparently, Adichim B'Yikar won't affect a mitzvah. Now, Tosfos points out, we cannot bring a raya from this halacha, the hadas with the berries, to our question of the hadas with the tamara growing over that cut spot. A big difference between two cases. He says, by berries, it's biyada. It was in his hands, within his ability to remove those berries. And therefore he says, it's different. It's a lower level of dichui, as opposed to the case where the niktam roishe ended up with a tamara growing. It's not within his ability. He can't make the tamara grow. He can't fix up that hadas. So in the case of the berries, since it's biyada to fix it up, so although it's dicha mi'ikara, because it entered yontif when it was possible, but that pastels could have been manipulated. He could have removed that psul. He could have removed the berries. So that's not such a severe form of dicha, and therefore Tosfos says, although the Gemara does conclude that from this halach of the berries we see dicha mi'ikar is not an issue by mitzvah, but that's specifically in a case where it's biyadeh. Not necessarily could you compare it to the case of tamara where it's not biyadeh. That's an interesting point that Tosfos points out here. So in summary, let's just go back to the initial shaila. Would a dicha affect a chevetz shel mitzvah? So the conclusion is like this. When it comes to l'chumra, we say no. Such as in the case where the ruach covered over the dam and then it got exposed again, he's chayiv to be machasa. Since over there it's a chumra, we assume dicha doesn't affect the mitzvah. When it comes to a kula, such as in the case where the hadas was clipped off and a tamara arrives on Yom Tov, since at the entry point of Yom Tov, which is the initial zman mitzvah, this hadas was not right, it was dicha mi'ikara, can it be used now? I have a question mark. We're not sure. However, the Gemara did conclude that in a case where it's biyadei l'sakin, such as where he was mimayit the anavav, he removed the berries from his hadas on Yom Tov. Here it's another case of kula, but here it's different because it was biyadei to remove that interference. So if it's just dicha mi'ikara, which is not as severe as nira v'nitcha, meaning is never right to begin with, it comes into Yom Tov being puzzle. So then by removing those berries we say it's kosher. But in a case where it was nira v'nitcha, such as where coming into Yom Tov it was still green and then it blackened. So it was roy at one point and then became not roy. That's more of an outright rejection. I don't want you. So in that case we're not sure what happens once he picks those berries. Continues the Gemara, Tana Rabban, we learned in a brayse, Einu matan bi Yom Tov. You're not meant to remove those berries on Yom Tov. Mishum Rab Lezer Rab Shimon Amru. It was said in the name of Rab Lezer, the son of Rab Shimon, Mimatan. You may pick berries from your hadas on Yom Tov. Welcome masaken mana bi Yom Tov. How can you do that? You're fixing the utensil. You're enabling the hadas for use. Amar Rav Asher Kigon Shalachtan Achila was speaking that he picked it for personal consumption. These berries are edible. That's what he had in mind. For Rab Lezer Rab Shimon, Savla Kavur, Rab Lezer, the son of Rab Shimon, who allows this, he's in line with his father's shita, Rab Shimon himself. Du Amar Davar Shein Miskaven Mutter. That a person may engage in a masa, which is a melacha, if he's not trying to do the melacha. What's a classic example? Dragging a bench along the ground, along the offer. And he's just trying to drag the bench. He's trying to get the bench. He's not trying to dig a furrow in the ground. Rab Shimon says, Davar shein maskaven, even though there's a subsequent melacha resulting from your action, doesn't matter. That's not what you have in mind. It's not melechas machshavas. It's not part of your ma'isa, so we don't consider you to be responsible for that. That explains our halacha, picking berries from the hadas, even though you're enabling the hadas for mitzvah use, but your kavanah is to eat. Therefore it's mutter. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Abaye and Rava both explained. There's one exception to Reb Shimon's heter. Moed Reb Shimon certainly agrees with psik reishe v'lo yamas. He can't say, well, I'm going to remove the head of the animal, psik reishe v'lo yamas. I don't want it to die. It's inevitable. That's not called avish in miskaven. Rashi says, kim miskaven chashavle. That's exactly what you had in mind. True, you don't need the animal to die, but you can't have one without the other. It's one and the same. So if you're removing the head, you can't claim, well, I have no interest in the animal dying. It's called miskaven. Likewise, in our case, picking berries off a hadas. True, he's doing it la'achila, but he's enabling the hadas for mitzvah use, and that's an automatic result. It's like psik reisha. So why is it mutter? Hachmai Skinner was speaking about a case, the islay shana achriti. He already has another hadas. So in this case, all he's trying to do is pick the berries la'achila. And especially according to Rashi's pshat that it's only a shvus, it doesn't appear like he's doing a malacha. Everybody sees that he has a hadas available. He doesn't need this for mitzvah. In which case we say that there's no issa d'rabbanan at all. Go ahead and pick those berries. And even if somebody could come along and decide to use the hadas, it's mutter, it's kosher. Tana Rabban, huter egdei b'yamtiv. Suppose he tied his lulav with his hadas and a rava properly, using a proper knot, and then on Yom Tov it unraveled, it came apart. Oigdei kagudash yarik. He can retie it, but only loosely, like a bundle of vegetables. Meaning you'll take a strap and wrap it around, tuck it in. You can actually tie it. Kesher is a malacha. You can't do it on Yom Tov. V'amai, says the Gemara, why suffice with just doing a gudash yarik style? Le'anvi mi'anav. Do something better. Go and bow it. Make a bow which is stronger. Hamani Rabbi Yehuda. This price is Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Niva Kshirim al Yosei. He holds that even an aniva is considered like a kesher, as discussed in Gemara Shabbos, and therefore you can't make an aniva. Rabbi Yehuda, if that's the case, if following Rabbi Yehuda, then what good is kagudah shel yarok, just wrapping a band around it? Eged ma'alisaboy. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to make a true eged. You have to really knot them together, bundle them together with a true kesher. Otherwise, you haven't done the mitzvah. Says in Gemara, Tana, this brisa, savala kavasei b'chad. On the one hand, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. That what? That a bow is tantamount to a kesher, and therefore that can't be done. That's not an option. But on the other hand, he disagrees with him. Rabbi Yehuda holds tying together with a proper knot is a requirement for the lulav, as we discussed in Amar Aleph. He learns that from Agudas Esav. It needs to be Aguda Achas. This Tana doesn't hold to that. This Tana holds like the Chachamim. It's a nice thing. It's Zekelu Anveyu, to have them neatly lined up, neatly tied together. But it's not critical, and therefore, if he sees that his egg comes apart, he should just go ahead and do some sort of improvised wrap, in which case he's not doing a malacha, but he is being Mekayim somewhat the concept of Igud. Let's go to Rashi, 10 lines from the bottom. Actually, 11 lines from the bottom. Hi Tana Savala Kavasei B'chada. On the one hand, the Tana holds like Rabbi Yehuda. The Aniva Kshira Hilin in Shabbos. We consider Aniva like a kesher. So that's out of the picture. Upolo Galei Belulav, the Eintzarech Eged. But he holds that you don't have to have an Eged by Lulav. Says Rashi Sham, Inam Yehacha, we learn from this brisa, the Be'inam Belulav Kesher Gomer. When you do Iged by the Lulav, it has to be a proper knot. Sheyiksher Shnei Rashi Eged V'Aguda. You have to actually tie them together with a proper knot. Right? It's mashma from the Gemara. According to Rabbi Yehuda, a true eged is only a proper knot. And even according to the Tana of this brisa, it seems like he already tied it properly before Yom Tov, and then it came apart. So now he's stuck. He can't make a proper knot. But ideally, a proper knot is in place. If he does a kagudah shel yarok, just wrapping the band around, tucking it in, that's not a proper eged. Listen to this Rashi. Even the Rabbanon who disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda, even untied lulav is fine. Moidu, they agree. We learned this in Amar Aleph. The mitzvah l'oidei. It's a mitzvah to tie it together. The sani leil, as we learned today, b'shem zeh kelim aveyu. V'okim nekirabanan. Oh, so Rashi has a chiddush here. That's certainly according to Rabbi Yehuda, you need a proper kesher. But even according to Rabbanan, it's not critical to have igud. But if you can do igud because of zeh kelim aveyu, do it right. Do it with a kesher. Now, there's a shaila brought down poskim regarding the case, the lulav case, which is made of braided, woven lulav branches. They call it kaishakel. Can that be used for eged? Now we pass like the Rabbanon. It's only because of zeh kelim aveyu. Problem is, it's not a kesher. Right? You could just slip the lulav in and out. It's not properly tied. So some poskim say that you can't use it. It's mashman the Gemara over and over in Rashi that eged is really a kesher. It has to really be tied together. And this doesn't really conform. But some poskim, going back hundreds of years, say, yeah, according to Rabbanan, you don't need a proper eged. You need zeh kelim aveyu. It should look nice and presentable. Putting it in a handle, in a case, you don't get nicer than that. And certainly that conforms to Hidur Mitzvah. The Cham Sefer disagrees. He writes, it's not for us to define the concept of noi, what the Torah had in mind. And perhaps he means, the noi can be applied in different ways. Perhaps the point of igud is to bind together the different types of the mitzvahs, different types of yidden. The Gemara says that each min represents a different segment in Klal Yisrael. Tzadikim, the Maratzim, etc. So perhaps the noi here is more symbolic, a spiritual thing. Bind them together, have them joined together, ba'achdus. So it's not for us to decide how to apply the concept of eged. If the Gemara clearly speaks about a kesher being required for eged, so who's to say that this kesher can suffice? It's not really a knot. You're not really tying it together. It's lying nicely and neatly, but they're not really tied together. It's something you can do on Yom Tov, in and out. It's not an issue of a kesher. So he disagrees. You cannot use this handle. The Mishnah Berurah brings that some do and some don't, and it seems like the minhag olam is to go ahead and use these handles. Some actually machmer that in addition to the handle, they'll take another strap, a lulav branch, and they'll actually tie together, whether over probably under the handle, tie together the lulav hadas and arava to be mekayim the concept of eged according to all shittas. Okay, time for a brief chazar of today's daf. We started with the chiddush that a tzmara which grew over the niktam roishay can restore the hadar status. Rabbi Yirmiyah had a shaila for us. What happens if it was niktam before Yom Tov and on Yom Tov? The tzmara arrives to cover up the cut. Shall we say dichui by a chevet shal mitzvah or not? The conclusion was, when it comes to l'chumra, we don't say dichui. When it comes to l'kula, we have a shaila. When it's a case of l'kula, but it's biyada l'saken, such as a fellow who picked the berries off his hadas on Yom Tov. So if it was dachim yikar, if it was never really roy until this point, which is not such a severe form of dichui, the Gemara concludes it works. When it's nira v'nitche, meaning if it only happened on Yom Tov, so it was roy at the beginning of Yom Tov and then it became rejected. That's a more severe form of rejection that we're unsure about. Now regarding berries on the hadas, so we learned that green ones are fine, they match up with the rest of the hadas. Black, or for that matter red as well, interfere with the hadas, irrelevant of location, whether they're all concentrated on one spot or distributed throughout the hadas. We had a machlekes in the case where he was memait, the anavav, he picked the berries on Yom Tov himself. According to Ulezer at Tzaddik, it's puzzle. According to Chum Kasher, we had several ways to understand the machlekes. We have the brayso at the end of the daf discussing whether or not you can actually pick those berries off on Yom Tov. Is there an isser of malacha or shvus? Tanakama says you can't do it. Reb Shimon says you can, and the Gemara's maskana is because it was ein miskaven. He was doing it la'achila, and he had another one. It's not considered a tikkun. We had a machlokes regarding igud of lulav. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's required. According to Rabban, it's only a mitzvah on mufchar. And it's pretty clear from the Gemara that according to Rabbi Yehuda, and some say even according to Rabbanon, In order to be Mekayim Igud, there has to be a proper Kesher Shekayama, which can only be done during the weekdays. Haslacha Rabba to you and Kol Tov.